The car didn't look fast. Not at first. It sat low and wide in the early morning fog, its long tail stretching out like something unfinished or unstable. Mechanics whispered around it. Drivers avoided eye contact with it. Even the pit lane felt quieter when it rolled by, because everyone knew. Something about this machine wasn't right. It wasn't just fast. It wasn't just powerful. It felt wrong. And at Le Mans, where speed had already taken lives, wrong wasn't something you ignored. It was something you feared. And yet, someone had decided to race it anyway. In the late 1960s, endurance racing was war. Not metaphorically, not symbolically. War. Manufacturers weren't just chasing trophies. They were chasing dominance. Prestige. Global recognition worth millions of dollars in sales back home. In America, muscle cars ruled the streets. In Europe, Le Mans ruled everything else. And one company was tired of losing. Porsche had spent years building a reputation for precision, reliability, and engineering brilliance. But there was one thing they didn't have: an overall win at the 24 hours of Le Mans. And that mattered, because Le Mans wasn't just a race. It was a statement. Win there, and your name echoed from California highways to German autobahns. Lose there, and you were just another manufacturer. So Porsche made a decision. They would build something radical, something unstoppable, something no one else dared to create. They called it the 917. On paper, it was genius. A massive 12-cylinder engine mounted behind the driver. Lightweight construction, aerodynamics that, theoretically, would let it slice through the air like nothing before. It was designed to dominate Le Mans. There was just one problem. No one knew how to control it. Drivers who tested the early versions didn't talk about lap times. They talked about survival. The car didn't behave like anything else on the track. At high speeds, especially on the Mulsanne Straight, where cars could stretch past 200 miles per hour, it became unstable. The rear end felt loose. The front felt disconnected. The entire car seemed to float, like it was barely touching the ground. One driver described it as driving on ice at 200 miles per hour. Another refused to get back in after a single session. And these weren't amateurs. These were the best drivers in the world. Men who raced knowing that death was part of the job. And even they were shaken. Still, Porsche pressed forward. Because backing out wasn't an option anymore. Too much money had been spent. Too much pride was on the line. And too many eyes were watching. In America, racing fans were used to brute force. Big V8 engines. NASCAR legends wrestling steel-bodied beasts around oval tracks. Raw horsepower. Yes, but predictable. Controllable. The 917 wasn't that. It was something else entirely. Something that didn't just test skill. It tested nerve. And Porsche needed drivers who were willing to take that risk. So they kept pushing, testing, tweaking, rebuilding. But something deeper was wrong. The car wasn't just difficult. It was unpredictable. And unpredictability at 200 miles per hour isn't a flaw. It's a death sentence. By the time the 917 arrived at Le Mans, tension filled the air. Other teams noticed it immediately, not just because of its speed, but because of how it moved. There was something unsettling about it. It didn't look planted. It didn't look safe. And in an era where safety was already minimal, that mattered. Drivers began to talk, quietly at first, then more openly. They questioned whether the car should even be allowed to race. Because Le Mans wasn't forgiving. The track stretched for miles, much of it public road. No runoff areas. Minimal barriers. Mistakes didn't end in gravel traps. They ended in tragedy. And now, Porsche had brought a machine that seemed designed to amplify those mistakes. The first rail warning didn't come during the race. It came before it. During testing, the car lifted. Not metaphorically, literally. At high speeds, the aerodynamics, something Porsche believed would give them an advantage, became their biggest enemy. Air rushed underneath the car, reducing grip. The rear lost stability. The car didn't just feel light. It became light. Too light. And when you're traveling at over 200 miles per hour, light is the last thing you want to feel. Engineers scrambled. They made adjustments. Shortened the tail. Changed the bodywork. Tried to force the car back onto the ground. But they were racing against time. Le Mans was coming. And backing out now would mean admitting failure. Something Porsche wasn't willing to do. Race day arrived. Crowds packed the circuit. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Because despite everything, the 917 was still the fastest thing there. If it held together. If the drivers could control it. If it didn't kill someone first. That was the unspoken question hanging over the track. Not who would win, but what would happen. When the race began, the 917 surged forward. And for a moment, it looked unstoppable. The speed was real. The dominance was real. Everything Porsche had promised, it was all there. But so was the danger. Drivers fought the car through every straight, every corner, every braking zone. It demanded constant correction, constant focus. There was no margin for error. And over 24 hours, that kind of pressure breaks people and machines. As the race unfolded, the cracks began to show. Mechanical issues, instability, fatigue. The car that was supposed to dominate started to fall apart. Not in one dramatic explosion, but piece by piece, like something that was never meant to last. And the drivers knew it. They could feel it in every vibration, every twitch of the steering wheel. This wasn't just racing anymore. This was survival. Behind the scenes, panic set in. Engineers watched helplessly as their creation struggled. Team managers faced a brutal reality. They had built the fastest car on the track, but they might have also built the most dangerous. And if something went wrong, if there was a crash, a fatal one, the consequences wouldn't just be personal. They would be global. Reputation, lawsuits, the future of the company itself. Everything was at stake. Then came the turning point. Not a single crash, not a single moment, but a realization. Clear, undeniable. The car, as it existed, could not continue like this. Something had to change, or it would end badly. After Le Mans, the fallout began. Quietly at first, then louder. Drivers spoke out about the danger. Teams questioned the design. And regulators, already under pressure to make racing safer, took notice. Because this wasn't just about one car. It was about what that car represented. A line that had been crossed. Speed over safety. Innovation without control. And in a sport already flirting with disaster. That was a line that couldn't be ignored anymore. Porsche went back to the drawing board. They had no choice. The 917, in its original form, was too dangerous, too unstable, too unpredictable. So they redesigned it. Shorter tail, better aerodynamics, more control, and eventually, it worked. The 917 would go on to become one of the most dominant race cars in history, winning Le Mans, breaking records, cementing Porsche's legacy. But that's not the full story, because the version that succeeded wasn't the version they started with. The original 917, the one that terrified drivers, that flirted with disaster, that version was quietly buried. Not literally, but in the narrative, in the way the story is told, because history remembers winners, not the versions that almost went too far. And that raises a question, one that still lingers today. How close did it come? Not to victory, but to catastrophe. Because in an era where safety was an afterthought and speed was everything, it wouldn't have taken much. One failure, one mistake, one moment of instability at 200 miles per hour, and the story of the 917 and Porsche itself could have ended very differently. Today, we look back at that car as a legend, a masterpiece, a turning point in racing history. But legends have a way of hiding their darkest chapters. And the truth is, the 917 didn't start as a triumph. It started as a warning, a reminder of what happens when ambition outruns control, when engineers chase the impossible and get closer than they ever should have. Somewhere, buried in old test notes and forgotten conversations, there are details we'll never fully know. Moments that never made it into the official story. Decisions made under pressure. Risks taken that shouldn't have been. And maybe, just maybe, there were signs. Clear signs that the car was too dangerous. That it shouldn't have raced at all. But they raced it anyway. Because in motorsport, there's always a line. And someone is always willing to cross it. The only question is, how far is too far? And who decides before it's too late?